Hey Matt, how you doing? Welcome back to Beyond the Skin.
Yeah, well, how you doing, Bill? I'm glad to be back.
Yeah, I'm doing good. It's been a little while. This is our second episode,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm pretty excited. What do you want to talk about today? Anything interesting happening out there?
Okay, let me bring you to my week.
Uh
Week
oh.
just gone by. I've been working on a document. It's going to be an educational piece to do with exoskeletons in schools
Oh,
and in
cool.
colleges and university, introducing like a strain of educational systems to inform people about what they are. Right, this is
Yeah.
where it gets very interesting. I was I got into a bit debate with my significant other about robots.
Robots.
In
Now wait a
fact,
minute. You're jumping from exoskeleton to a robot. What the heck's even the difference, right?
this is what got to it. How do you actually define the difference? I'm reading from one side of the pond, it's this.
Right.
Read from the other side of the pond, it's this. And I'm kind of like, whoa, hang on a second. So my first angle was, let's say we use a soft exoskeleton.
Sure.
We put the exoskeleton on.
Right.
The thing is predominantly made of fabrics with some stretchable bands to imitate muscle contraction.
Okay.
Is that a wearable robot?
No. So, for me, a robot's got to be a machine. And there's got to
Hmm.
be some level of automation. Even up to, say, okay, it's fully cognizant of itself, all that kind of fancy sci fi kind of stuff. But let's just say it's got some level of automation and it can do stuff without me telling it what to do at some level. That's what I think of as a robot.
Okay. This is what got us onto such a heated debate. So this is nerdy stuff.
Yeah.
Nerdy phase activated.
All right, I'm ready.
Take a DC motor.
Yeah.
As we know, it operates on coils, and that DC motor will allow you to just charge it, if you will, and create the rotational effect.
Sure.
If you put an encoder onto it, which will measure the rotations that are occurring from it
Right.
and feed that back into it, you actually have a
Sure.
servo motor that you buy off the shelf.
Yeah.
Right. So the servo motor has some level of change within it. Does that make the servo motor a robot?
Well, okay. So a servo motor, in a sense, has some sort of programming in it. That programming could be code, like we think of today, or it could be what we used to call, I think it's still called this, hard coding. Basically put in the chips to where it's going to do a certain thing. But most of the time, it's
Mhm.
it's it's some soft coding. It's an actual program. I actually did this back in 1988, back in the dark ages, when we just
I'm showing
moved.
your age.
Yeah, just moved from using stone tablets to, we were trying to control motors, and literally,
Yep.
all you did was put in used a sort of computer that connected to the microelectronic board. When you put in the commands peek and poke, and you just did, for loops, and you try to
Mhm.
control the speed of the motor. So, is let's get back to the question. Is a robot just a machine that executes code?
Mm.
Right?
Right, exactly. And then, but if you think, remember the punch that, remember, I mean, I know neither of us were alive for this one, but the
Right.
punch code on the actual
Oh
machines
yeah.
when they'd
Oh yeah.
feed
Oh
the
yeah.
punch code
Yeah,
in,
yeah.
and then the machines would react with pins,
Sure.
which is a really, really early phase of introducing binary code.
Right.
But you do kind of say then surely that was the point of being a robot. But do you remember? Now I may butcher the term. Were they called mechanitrons? So basically, they were a mechanical type human
Right.
that reacted with mechanical insides, but they were never classed as a robot.
Yeah, but hold on. It's like, okay, people can argue with, okay, the scan cards. I can't remember what there's a name for them, but anyway,
Yeah, I know there is.
the
Yeah.
scan cards that basically have the rectangular punches in them and stuff like punch cards. And
Yep.
let's go to something, because people argue it's like, oh, that's just an early computer. That's not a robot. Blah blah blah. Because here's the inherent thing with a robot is people always kind of feel it has some level of movement to it, some sort of mechanical movement,
True.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk super early days. How's this any different than a music box?
Yeah.
I mean, really, you got little buttons on a metal disc, and it's playing the little buttons, and it's making the doll move around, and they're can be super complicated and all that kind of stuff. Is that a robot? You know?
Yeah. Mechanical workings.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that's the thing. It's like, what takes it beyond just a purely mechanical instrument to an actual robot, as we're trying to make this comparison to an exoskeleton, which I still argue an exoskeleton doesn't really work without the human in it. So there's something else there beyond just a robot.
There is. So that then streamlines quite nicely to the angle I wanted to take. Let's go back to the exoskeleton world, and let's say some of the big ones. Now I'm going to use some movie references just so I'm not pushing people's items. Naughty.
We don't endorse nor nor have any liability for these references.
So if you think of the power loader from Aliens.
Yes.
So the system itself would stand upright.
Yes.
And if you remember, Ripley would stand into it and she buckled herself into it. And then the system would only start moving then.
It's just a forklift, though. It's a fancy forklift.
Fancy forklift.
Right?
However,
am I wrong? I mean, I get that it looks different, but at the end of the day, it's just a different interface to a forklift.
I mean, really, we're just trying to rebadge something that we've presently already got,
right.
And that works pretty well.
Right. I mean, so if you wanted to, do the Rube Goldberg thing of a forklift and make it more complicated and make it where it has legs and arms now, I mean, is that not the power loader? Is maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's something more to it.
Yeah. So then, if you think of that phase, that this thing would survive relatively by itself, and wouldn't work unless Ripley was in it. So it'd have a human interface with it. Now, I don't know if you saw this. Now, this was just, I think this was just before Christmas. This is a Korean exoskeleton, and the guy nicknames it the F1.
Okay.
So if you get on YouTube, type in F1 exoskeleton. And it's just because he's a huge fan, as I was reading about it.
Right.
But this exoskeleton walks up to him as he's paraplegic in his wheelchair, wraps itself around him, and then he gets up and walks off.
Nice.
And you go, that's interesting. So this thing was able to find him. Or, I mean, obviously this is probably relatively staged, and I get that. But the principle of what he was proposing is a system that walks up, surrounds itself onto the user, and then walks off. Mm-hmm. So now you've got a level of autonomy with a human in it moving forward. So is that a wearable robot, or is that an exoskeleton, a robotic exoskeleton? Or...
Hold on. So let's throw one more thing in the mix, because this came up in early days of when we were forming the Exoskeleton Standards Committee. And that was one of this concept, and it may be wrong, it may not hold water, but this was one of the things we talked about. If it's just a device that the user rides in and doesn't do any part of the function themselves, is it just a automated vehicle and not an exoskeleton? So if a Tesla, not to endorse anybody, but if Tesla drives up, you roll out, say you are, paraplegic or something, and you roll out there in your wheelchair, car opens the door for you, you slide out of your wheelchair into your car there, put your wheelchair in, closes the door, boom, off you go somewhere. How's that any
Different.
different than the situation you're describing? What is the unique thing about that makes that an exoskeleton versus a vehicle, automated vehicle, or as you're saying, a wearable robot? Is an
Yeah, very
automated
true.
Tesla a wearable robot?
Yeah, because I mean, in its projection, you're actually strapped into this, aren't you?
Yes.
Same principle lies. And it's an interesting point, and it makes me wonder. It is you kind of phrase it, go, yeah, that's a great point.
Well, it's and we nobody had a good answer for this. Is like when you're just riding, and you can make some arguments in this context, like, well, they're not really riding, they're helping guide in some way, and it's like, where is that line where it moves beyond just some different type of vehicle, whether it's got wheels or legs or whatever it may have, and now it's a device that's part of you. Let's just call it an exoskeleton, and you're very much a part of it, and it really doesn't do a lot without your intent and purpose to it.
Yeah, because the truth of it is without really defining that, it's hard to really say. I mean, surely if you have a pilot,
Yes.
I mean, saying that pilot.
Yeah.
So if you're controlling, if you're in this structure, and you're still piloting this, so you just controlling a vehicle and its overall piece.
Right. Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, are you, in a sense, like an airline pilot? You're piloting a device, a vehicle, conveyance, whatever it may be, versus, and I guess I'm drawing some distinctions that have built up over a while, and they may be good and they may not, but the distinction has always been, at least in the exoskeleton world, for a lot of folks, has been that you're not a pilot. You're actively working with the device in a very one-on-one, human-centric type fashion. That's always been kind of part of this. Because I'll give you another one. And again, not to endorse anybody's product, but the Steadicam. So a Steadicam could be thought of as an exoskeleton. It helps you, it augments your capability to hold a camera, and hold a camera very steady, right? Steadicam. So is that an exoskeleton? Or is it something else?
Hey, now.
Yeah, see, you're all choked up. I've got you all emotional.
Yeah. For me, I've always been really interested on that idea. Is a Steadicam an exo? Now, I think I think for me the definition of what it does, I'm still to be properly convinced that it does sit within that area of an exoskeleton, because essentially it's an extra arm, isn't it?
Sure.
That aids on holding the thing in position,
right,
and then uses your body to offload some of that weight in different areas.
Correct.
So I suppose the key term, the early term, the augmentation of what it's doing still meets that criteria.
Right.
But yeah, I'm always caught in two minds with it. I can understand where everybody comes from. I'm kind of like, is it really an exoskeleton?
Right.
I'm still not 100% sure.
And here's the other question. So I'll just switch completely 180 on this. Doesn't matter. Here's the thing. We can debate whether the F1, the Korean F1 exoskeleton is an exoskeleton or a wearable robot or a wearable vehicle or a power loader or whatever it is, but doesn't matter. And I guess the question really is, how does that change how we use it? How does it change how it helps us, and how does it change whether it's safe or not? That's what it gets to me.
Yeah. I think when we start to talk, as we well know, I think when we start to talk about safety and the process of safety of what we do, I think it can have a huge impact.
Yeah.
And I think if we can make sure that every document that we write is consistently across the board saying, it's A, B, and C, then
Mm-hmm.
perfect.
Right.
And I think it's that's important because at the minute, I believe a lot of people don't consider the safety of some of this equipment that's been made.
Right. Right. Yeah, and that's the thing is like, just like the name of the show is, all of this equipment is beyond the skin, and some
Hmm.
of it's a little closer to the skin than others. You could argue
Yeah,
exoskeletons, you wear them, wear them like a suit. Um,
yeah.
you could argue even some vehicles like the sci-fi power loader. You're sort of you're in there. It's you're
Hmm.
strapped in. So um, that that
So,
makes a difference
I
from a
mean,
safety perspective.
and I think what's really important on that side is that if you get too many people try to pushing this under one umbrella of saying it's definitely this,
Right.
you get in a very tricky area. So, for example, not naming any names, but some reference has been made towards a wearable robot under exosuits.
Mm. Oh, really?
So it's an interesting one of that you've got a wearable robot under an exosuit. And my thought of an exosuit, personally, an exosuit doesn't exist in my thought because the idea of that it is a, if you will, a smart garment, if anything else. But these tend to be hyperelastic mechanical reactions, like we talked about earlier.
Right. Right.
And then you kind of go, are you not trying to shoehorn this into one particular area so you can control the overall area by one term? Because that is where I think things get dangerous.
Well, and the exosuit is that term is kind of it's a really interesting term because you can start applying it to a lot of different things, and that's why it's very difficult to kind of nail it down what it is. Again, not to endorse anybody, but Under Armour, which is an example
Yeah.
of a performance compression type textile. You could make the argument that it's an exosuit because it's helping you do things or whatever, some sort of performance
Augments.
enhancements, right?
Hmm.
And you wear it, and it's right next to your skin, so it's like an exosuit. So, but is it? And really, is that from a safety perspective and from a technical perspective, is that just marketing lingo, and that's fine? Or does it mean something that we need to be concerned about as far as, hey, this is important. This is an important destination because there are some safety aspects of this that we need to carve out just for this type of thing. That's where
Yeah.
it's more interesting to me.
So I mean, to go in your terms, to go complete 180 in what we were just talking about.
Yeah.
If for me, exosuits doesn't quite exist, for
Right.
example. So it exists in the world in the advanced textile world. Because I say advanced textile world because we both know some of the new textiles which are coming out from all over the world are like things from the future, like you'd never dreamed of.
Star
Anyway,
Trek. Right.
yeah, yeah. So if you imagine that an exosuit doesn't exist and it's a smart textile and it exists in that world,
Right.
to go 180, if a robot is a system which has autonomy, and if a wearable robot has that human in the loop,
Yeah.
does exoskeleton exist?
Right. 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 Yeah, I totally get that. So does an exoskeleton exist? And I guess the key thing to me is there some discriminatory level in between the concept of an exoskeleton and a wearable robot? And where
Mm.
is there? I hate to draw a Venn diagram, but where's the overlap between those two, right? But
Yeah.
that's really kind of what we're trying to get at, and because here's why I would say we should even worry about those terms is maybe there's safety or technical reasons that we need these two different terms, because there is some key differences there. So you
Yeah.
would argue, and I can make, I can make 180 of this argument, but let's just make this argument. If I have a wearable robot on me versus an exoskeleton, I know that wearable robot, one, I always know, is powered. That's a given. That's not always the case for an exoskeleton. Number two, I always know, because it's a robot, there's some level of autonomy. I don't know that for sure with an exoskeleton. And then number three, I know that I have some level of control with that wearable robot, and I have a variable degree of control with the exoskeleton. So that's where they're a little bit similar as far as the control. Now, it might be different, but they both have some level of control. But I would argue there's a caveat with the number three for the wearable robot, which is who gets priority when the controls conflict. When my command says to do this, but the autonomy of the robot says to do the opposite, who wins?
Who wins?
And that's fairly clear over on the exoskeleton side, at least right now. Maybe that'll get muddy too, because there is this gray area here. But on the robot side, that's always the thing. That gets back to, the classic robot rules from Isaac Asimov and a lot of folks like that. Just like, they make these three basic rules about, the robot cannot harm the human, or blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. And, that can be, as many books have shown, that can be kind of worked around and turned the opposite on you too.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, that's interesting side, really, of just that some exoskeletons, like for me personally, my adaptation of exoskeleton would have a hardened structure.
Yes.
It would always have a hardened structure and be built around,
right.
around the user.
Like a beetle.
Like a beetle, exactly that. So, like as if we'd have evolved with a skeleton around us, that's essentially what we're doing.
Right.
Now, that then gets me to the point of that. Perhaps the term, if it even exists, a wearable robot, if that term exists, it isn't the overall term that exists. It's a subterm that exists within the classification of an active exoskeleton.
That's
like a small sub area.
I could see that. So argue the opposite of that. So what would someone say? Say, hey, that sounds made up. Why wouldn't it be the opposite? Why wouldn't an active exoskeleton be a subclass of a wearable robot?
So, not all exoskeletons are active.
True.
So if you're just going to have active on it, and it's going to be an active referred to piece. What if you have an exoskeleton which is hardened structure around it, augments the user, and has some level of sensing, but doesn't have any active component against the person? Is the automated system that's on board that could be guiding the person, for example? So, it could be a built-in GPS on their back.
Right. So I will go back. I love to circle back because that's always fun. So if you make the argument that the high level term, and we're being totally terminology geeky here, but that's okay.
Yeah.
If you make the argument that the higher level term is wearable robot and the lower level term is active exoskeleton, then I would say the issue with that is going to be that if you look at the power loader situation, here you have an active exoskeleton, but it's basically a wearable forklift. It's all manual controls in a sense. It's all hydraulics. There's no autonomy. It doesn't do anything without the person moving it in some way.
Pushing a button.
So that kind of situation to me, would not fit underneath a wearable robot. It'd be like some sort of, exception to the rule. But I think there's lots more of those kind of things. Now, people can argue, it's like, well, if you look at the ones on the market today, there's no active exoskeletons that doesn't have some level of microelectronics with some level of programming in them. Maybe. I don't know everyone on the market, but I could see where someone could make that statement, right? And so I could see where
Yeah, I
people
get
would
that.
say, hey, every active exoskeleton is a wearable robot, and vice versa. But I'm not sure
Right.
that's right.
No, I know. And I mean, I have heard this, and I've heard this in many different discussions about it being an active that these are wearable robots. But even though this has been said, for me, still doesn't make it 100% factual.
Right.
I,
It's like it's almost like, and this is totally like, kind of fruity language. It's like saying, "Oh, a unicorn is a horse." You know, it's it's like, well, let me put it more in real terms. It's like saying a hippopotamus is a river horse. I'm like, you ain't never seen a hippopotamus. I can guarantee you
yeah.
that.
But one thing that is completely clear, though, if you look across the entire world of people in terminologies in every standards development organization, no one has actually said what a wearable robot is.
True. But that
So
that also goes back to, like, I'm not sure. I know there's several definitions out there, but I don't know if anybody's ever, like, people have ever coalesced around what really is a robot.
mm,
And because it always goes down, people get hung up, and rightly so, around this autonomy thing, and it gets around sentience, and it comes into current everyday conversation because of AI, because people
yeah,
are not because people are using AI in a robot, but because people are using AI in their computers and in their daily work, their spell checkers, whatever, and
yeah,
so that makes it a little bit more complicated to define what it is, and how's it
yeah,
at the end of the day, robot starts as a machine. Now, my pondering question is, what does the exoskeleton start out as? Did it start out as a machine, or is its basis something other than that? And I'm not sure.
mm. And this is where that debate really lies. Of where I think what's important though is, I mean, you and me both been in so many meetings like this before. Terms get thrown into the soup of
Sure.
discussion.
Right.
And a lot of the terms will they'll go through the mill, and then they'll either go out the door or they'll go into terminology. I am starting to realize that a lot of the discussions that we have over the years, we need to start dragging some of these terms in, because when I've been writing some of my stuff this week for the educational things,
Yeah.
I was looking to pull terminology pieces into this and give good reference. And then I realized we had gaps. And I don't mean we, I mean across all
Right.
all developments in technology. These gaps were there because nobody's dared to actually stick their toe into exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So the big old question really refines for me is, when I looked at what a robot is, it refers to being able to be programmed,
Yeah.
like you said.
Yeah.
And then I knew about the servo with the encoder,
Which is
and I
awesome.
was kind of like, does that make it
Yeah.
does that make it a robot? So it kind of shows that the definition of robot is old,
Yeah, and
and
I
there
mean, I would
needs to be an
argue
update.
just from that definition, the servo is basically what I would call a robotic component. It's
Yeah,
clearly it can be
exactly.
programmed and it's a machine. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, and I think that one really common term I come across all the time is autonomy. What
mm,
autonomy is,
right,
because everybody uses it in their own right. And autonomy, AI, robotics, they all exist in that same soup, and it just needs to be clearly defined as to what it is. Because, yeah, I look and look and look, and I come away with so many different versions.
Well, what's interesting to me is that this is an indicator in my mind of whether you're in what we call an emerging technology area. And to me, one of the clearest indicators is what happens is exactly what happened to you. You were trying to do something and you find gaps in the language, in the terms, in the definitions that allows you to communicate and effectively do something in that area. That means that, you're, in a sense, you're breaking new ground. And that's the thing with, I'll say, exoskeletons, and for the folks that call them wearable robots, there's new ground being broken, even though a lot of this is a combination of technologies and science from a bunch of different areas. It's still new.
Wow.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that's really where that lies, and I think, but as these new technologies emerge, I think we need to be completely avast to the idea of that. Some of our aspects of that we're introducing don't meet it. So, like I said, I was pulling up the term autonomy to remind myself, and yeah, you kind of go, I'm sure I read it, and I'm like, yeah,
Yeah, no.
and I think it's just we're getting so specific with our tech that we need to just really aid it along overall because of safety.
Yes. Well, and here's another sort of, stereotype, but sort of a truism. You know, when you go into complex, complicated areas and you get lost, because everybody gets lost, no matter who you are, no matter how smart you are or how good you are, uh, you know, the thing that tends to work almost every time is go back to the basics, you know?
Yeah,
And so, yeah, I would say for exoskeletons, when we start getting lost, go back to the skin, go back to the basics. Let's start from there
yeah.
and see how this thing that we're pondering about fits.
So, what was really interesting this week as well is the term exoskeleton. Who coined exoskeleton first for this type of devices? So, started off with Nikolai Yagin, who's obviously the Russian inventor who came up with it. It's something like I've not got it on the screen. It was something like the man walking amplifier
Right.
assistance device,
Right.
and you kind of go mouthful.
Yeah.
Then it goes down, and then, funnily enough, GE with Hardyman were
Did
the
they do
first
it?
people to ever coin the term exoskeleton.
Wow. Well,
So that's where it came from.
and GE was funded by the Army and the Navy, so
Hmm.
they can both take a little bit of credit of coming up with this, and which is kind
Uh-huh.
of funny.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, yeah. So,
So yeah,
so
yeah.
yeah, I
So
think that brings up the thing with the Hardy Man. We need to get back and give people an update on where this is. We've kind of
oh
dropped off
yeah,
the map on this, and I'm sure there's
yeah,
somebody out there that wants to know. Okay, what happened?
yeah. So yeah, we're gonna have to do that. We're an up and coming. So we're gonna get a special guest on anyway, who's working with us even further.
Oh, that'll be
But
awesome.
yeah, the Hardyman ensured the search isn't over.
Okay.
Some interesting side effects occurred. So the biggest thing for me, and this might seem obvious to you when I tell you, you'll kind of go, yeah, well, that's obvious. I didn't think of this. 4 years I've been looking for this. I didn't even think of this. So found all the instruction manuals, the processes that they went through,
Right.
everything noted, top to bottom. And I was looking for now, as you know, Bill, the Hardyman project was 2 stages.
Yes.
So they did the legs last because they thought it was going to be the easiest,
Of
which I still think
course.
is the funniest thing.
It's funny as ever.
The upper body of the actual structure, they targeted first, and then they did what they called the missile test. So they had the arm. The arm came in and it held a weapon above its head,
Yeah.
and they were showing that it worked. Then they moved on to phase 2, which was to do the legs and bring the whole thing together. I assumed that the arms would use to build straight into the lower legs.
Yeah.
Turns it wasn't.
Really?
There are two. So the upper body the famous picture of the researcher who's holding the arm
Yeah.
in front of him, that is a single prototype that was used to show the capacity of the arms. New arms were made.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So new arms were made, but they were never properly constructed.
Oh.
This original arm must still exist.
Oh, my
And
gosh.
that is so I reached out to people in New York, and yeah, this is a whole new area for discussion.
Oh,
But yeah,
we have
always.
we've got to get into that, because that is
Yeah, we
because
do.
here's the thing, and let's put a little bow on this, and I appreciate you kind of leading this discussion this direction. So what people could argue with strong veracity that the Hardyman was a wearable robot. Even GE and the Navy and Army called it an exoskeleton.
Mm-hmm.
So there you go.
There you go. And as a massive curveball, the Ralph Mosher,
Yes.
who was the inventor, the designer, and who came up with the Hardyman, was a robotics engineer by definition.
Of course.
He called it an exoskeleton. So it's kind of like, stick that in your pipe and smoke it.
Yeah, but I think there's going to be some surprises and some insights by continuing the study of this Hardyman and how they went about things, and why did they call it an exoskeleton versus, he certainly could have called it a wearable robot, but he didn't. And so I think this will be fascinating to go into next time.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's something that we're going to have to dive into a little deeper. We can show a little bit of Mount Mosher. We can show a little bit of what Hardyman did, and then what the research led to.
Yes, and someday we will have an episode on the road where we take a little trip and do some historical digging, Indiana Jones style, opening some boxes.
Oh yeah, I'll be getting some hats that are guarded by top men.
Top men.
Top men.
Yeah. All right, Matt. This was awesome. Appreciate it.
Yeah. As ever, I'll see you soon.
See you soon.